Winston! Winston!
Oh my god, my heart is beating so fast.
Wait.
I'm gonna start off with a really hot take. Cutting funding for Sleeping Dogs 2 was the biggest mistake that Square Enix ever made. Not only is it a game that still captivates countless gamers, it's one that people would rather play than the lackluster Tomb Raider and Hitman games that Square Enix keeps putting out year after year. A newsflash, you will never be as good as Naughty Dog in this category, and you should quit while you're ahead.
Yeah! Boss, we were just leaving. 走了啊?
And it was just getting interesting too. Winston!
Easily the highlight of Sleeping Dogs is the character and their development, and their relationships with each other throughout the game. Admittedly, they don't have the complexity of characters in games like The Last of Us and other super story-driven titles, but there's a charm to them that can't be overlooked. In Sleeping Dogs we follow Wei Shen, an undercover cop who has very deep triad roots. When he was young, before he joined the Hong Kong police force, he had deep relationships with many of the characters that we find in this game, which made him an ideal choice for going undercover and trying to take down the triad within Hong Kong. As one would expect, this caused a really major conflict of interest for Wei. As the story progresses, his corruption gets deeper and deeper, and we start to question which side he's going to take at the end of the day. Will he side with the triads, or hold up his job assignment? One of the most interesting dynamics we see early on is the relationship between Conroy and Wei. Conroy was very on edge at this time, given the fact that they had another rat within the triads early on.
I tell you what I didn't. Nothing to be impressed about. I'm watching you, new guy.
We see throughout the game, and what I'm going to show in these next few clips, that there's sort of a warming up that happens as Wei proves himself, and Conroy goes from an adversary of Wei to being one of his biggest supporters, and almost being a bit of muscle for him, as we get later on. With Winston killed by the 18K, Conroy, Jackie, and other members of the Sun On Yee were looking for a new leader. Wei stepped into this role really quickly.
Hey, Ricky. Look, easy. Look. We have to talk. I got nothing to say to you. Calm down, okay? Listen.
He showed that not only could he be trusted, but he provided a new unique vision for the Sun On Yee moving forward. Another character that plays a rather major role in Sleeping Dogs is Vivian Liu. Her key affiliation with Sunny Wo, a member who runs the entertainment end of the triads. Some of this is slightly less illicit, being in the music or general film industry, but they also have some more sinister ends. In addition to this though, they run pornography and prostitution rings. Vivian has always skirted the line between these two. One of the key ways this was the case was that Vivian was also used by Sunny Wo to win over multiple members of the triad. Ricky Wong, a good example, who tried to take her in as his partner, but as we see, Sunny Wo never really respected this. Wei, having a little bit stronger of a moral compass than many other members, was the only one who ever turned away Vivian. And he showed her that there could be a little bit of hope amidst all of the corruption that existed in the Sun On Yee. Everything comes crushing down Wei at the end, as his commander, Pendrew, goes rogue and turns him into the Sun On Yee as a rat. Wei is tortured to the brink of death, and has to fight his way out to stop the election and stop Big Smile Lee from becoming the new corrupt leader of the Sun On Yee.
I see you've cut your way through the amateur. But now amateur hour is over. Now,
Let's take a look at one of the more pivotal cutscenes of the game, when the higher members of the Sun On Yee attempt to elect a new leader.
We can't let this go on. We have to deal with 18K and with the police.
All right. We need a plan. Where's Tu Chin?
He's in seclusion.
Seclusion? He's in a hotel somewhere, riding the white tiger, that fat
Perhaps you are right, Brother Lee. With Uncle Po gone, we now need a chairman who can lead us through this.
Finally, you're making some sense, Chuck. I am the strongest. I am the most feared. I say I should be chairman.
Perhaps temporarily. We should go
Wait! We need to have a proper election. That is the way it has always been done. It's the Sun On Yi code.
Ha! You, a woman, talking of code. You should never have been allowed to be Sun On Yi.
But I was, and my contribution to this organization have been significant.
With respect, I have to agree with Sister Jane. We need to restore stability and order, and that means clear thinking. We should follow our tradition.
Our tradition? You've only been on Sun On Yi for a short time. What do you know about our tradition?
Nevertheless, Sister Zhang and Brother Shen are correct.
Fine. We'll have the election. But I'm warning you here and now. Making anyone other than me the chairman will be disastrous for Sun On Yi.
Everyone has a vote. Our tradition allows...
The tradition. Ricky! It's out.
I think one of the biggest issues with the 2013 era at Square Enix is that they had super unrealistic expectations of how their major titles at the time were going to sell. They all sold great at the end. If you look at Tomb Raider, that was a really good game. Hitman Absolution, Sleeping Dogs. Over time, they sold super well, but they were expecting a ridiculous level of sales, despite them all being a commercial success, and that's sort of what ended up scaring shareholders at the time. They were promised these ridiculous, unrealistic sales, sort of on the level of GTA 5, which admittedly is really hard to compete with, that caused such a scare. I think at the end of the day, the real issue is that Sleeping Dogs itself was a victim of its own time. At that point, some of the greatest games of all time were coming out.
You both must be very happy.
In 2013, the three major games that came out were Sleeping Dogs, Hitman, and Tomb Raider, all of which sold really well, but Square Enix still reported a loss of $61 million, which led to the resignation of their CEO. There was also a really major pivot happening at this time. With the other major games, like I said, coming out, GTA 5, Assassin's Creed, The Last of Us, all immensely popular games coming out in the same time frame. It made it really difficult for a lesser-known game like Sleeping Dogs to take off, which really hurt the sales. Another factor that Square Enix brought up was that there was a really big popularity boom in mobile and social video games and also microtransactions around this time. So with this loss, Square Enix decided that they would bet a little bit more on older IPs like Tomb Raider and Hitman. Now, while these games were good, the sales still were lackluster, and they were not nearly as good as their counterparts, like the Uncharted series and The Last of Us from Naughty Dog. They did try to spin off Sleeping Dogs 2 as the free-to-play open-world Triad Wars, but it was unfortunately limited PC and didn't really have a lot of interest, so it was shut down less than a year after it was open, which was super unfortunate because it was a really great experience. The other really major issue was just the ambition of Sleeping Dogs at the time. It was going to be a much more fully fledged game than Sleeping Dogs 1 was, and that is what sort of scared Square Enix, given the amount of money it would have taken to make this game come to fruition. Sleeping Dogs 2 really sounds like it was going to be incredible. There were plans for endlessly procedurally generated missions, which would have made the game almost go on forever. There was going to be a mobile companion app that allowed the players to command the city's police force using cloud-based saves, be able to interact with players in the real game when on the move. This is something that would have maybe been a little bit too much for a lot of players, but it's unfortunate that we never got to at least experience it. The gameplay is another place where this game really shines. The gunplay is a little rough around the edges, but the slow-mo is super satisfying. It can be used in many places throughout the game, and it definitely adds a degree of depth to the gunplay in other games where it feels super one-dimensional. The car chases and action hijacking are super cool, and make getting from one point in the map to another really fun, as compared to a game like GTA, where there's this non-stop, never-ending driving just to get from quest to quest. In the wedding mission, we have to help Uncle Po to the hospital. It's really cool fighting through the park on the way there, as this could have just as well been a cutscene.
My uncle, he's hurt. We need a doctor, now!
What is this? What's going on here?
My boy, maybe you'll want to leave before our friends, the police, show up.
Another item that is often overlooked is the case files. These are given as rewards for completing missions and give a little bit more context into the characters of this game. If you've never read these before, I highly recommend going back to do so. They provide so much information about the relationships between characters, where they came from, and how they fit into the greater story. Especially characters like Wei Shen, Wei's sister, who passed years ago. It lets us know a little bit more about how that happened, something we otherwise were not told by the characters directly in the game. It's small little attention to details like this that really make the game pop and make every playthrough very memorable. The next obvious thing to talk about is the open world events in this game. We have this pedestrian crossing the road that clearly pre-gamed too hard. It's this level of diversity in AI that I've never seen in any other game, where every single pedestrian seems to be the exact same. Especially given the fact this game came out 11 years ago, it simply blows my mind. I still remember the first time I played this game, and I was always so amazed by the amount of life in the city. Especially when we look at the nightclub here. How during the day it's pretty dead, but at night everything changes, which would happen in real life. We have modern AAA titles with budgets that blow this one out of the water, with access to technology that didn't exist, and they still haven't achieved the level of life that exists in this game. The inside of the club is another area that just feels so alive to me. It's always amazed me how they use volumetric lighting and fog to make this feel like you're actually there. Once we move past all of that, we get to karaoke, which is such a fun mini-game. Of course I won't be able to share the music because of the copyright, but you can imagine what happens here. It's something that does take a degree of skill, and it's super fun, and I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't before. It's little things like this that really don't exist in other video games, especially bringing in a little bit of a cultural aspect. If you look at Grand Theft Auto and other open world games, all of the open world events seem like such an afterthought, but in this game it's so core to the experience. Another really cool thing about this is new tracks for karaoke are rewards for various open world quests. This gives the player a lot of incentive to actually participate in the events when you get something that's worthwhile. Of course there are other games that do something similar, but I really struggle to think of games that really genuinely reward you for open world content and don't just add it as a little bit of extra fluff to make the game take longer. Another super well done item in this game is the living spaces that you could actually upgrade over time by finding people throughout the city that sell you items for your apartment. They added a bit of dimension to the 4 main areas of the city, allowing you to go to different apartments to access different items. It's such a cool hub to start out in every time you launch up the game, rather than just spawning in a random location. It's the vendors in this game for me as well. For example, the massages. Ones, I might add, that exist in these hole-in-the-walls in a back alley.
How'd you like to take me out? You won't regret it.
I mean, who could resist you?
You don't mind if I call you Daddy, do you, Daddy? I tell all my customers they're amazing, but this time I mean it.
God, the dialogue is so ridiculous, but it just works so well. Next, of course, we have to talk about the fight clubs, which are easily my favorite open world event in the entire game. Some of them pose a genuine challenge, and really give you a chance to flex all the new combat that you've learned throughout the game in your training. This is another item that has to be talked about in this game. I really cannot think of another game that executes hand-to-hand combat in the open world to this extent, even when compared to the Yakuza games. It's just so nice to have such a fluent system that has so many different ways you can approach any battle. when you look at another game like Grand Theft Auto that has basically one way to approach every fight and every encounter, it's just so refreshing. It's so clear that United Front invested a ton of time into these mechanics and put an amazing amount of research, and it's just such a shame that we never got to experience this again in another game. In Sleeping Dogs, there are a lot of different things you can buy and need a lot of money, and what better way to do that than gambling? The cockfights are a super interesting way to accomplish this. You pick a fighter, invest a certain amount of money, and hope for the best. There's obviously a cool exploit you could do with this to just make a save file right before in case you lose, and it was just a really fun way to make money with a little bit of chance. Every interaction with the street vendors is just so authentic, and I really enjoy them every time. It's definitely the little things in this game that just make it feel so alive. Then we have the street races, which sort of bring the Hong Kong culture of cars into the mix. I always loved the gathering areas before the races. I always thought this was a super cool touch. The races, like many other open world events, are a reward for completing other open world tasks, which makes you, again, very incentivized to complete them. While the races aren't super challenging, some of them are really interesting, and it's always enjoyable to play them. On every playthrough I do, I always complete all the races. They also offer you a really great opportunity to explore some of the map, and go to places that you might not otherwise during a normal playthrough. Another really cool aspect is the hacking QuickTime events that occur throughout the game. They always offer a unique challenge and make some otherwise tedious tasks actually really fun to do, especially when you're going throughout the city and trying to hack different cameras. The use of CCTV cameras is also such a cool touch in this game. This is one mission where we're bugging Vivian's apartment for Pendrew. And it's so interesting how they tackle going through and taking off the vent and other small items that you would do in this process. It makes it feel a lot more like you're involved in the process, rather than just running through a cutscene as you'd expect. There are many different events, such as the radio sensitivity, the code cracking, and a few others. Also love the perfectly timed, quirky little pieces of dialogue, like the one you're about to hear. This is during the battle at Mrs. Chu's restaurant, and it really made me laugh the first time I heard it.
This will be easy, no problem. You just have to be strong. That's what people respect.
One of the biggest highlights of this game is how well they recreated the feel of Hong Kong, and the people and the culture within it. The team at United Front Games spent so much time researching, visiting, and speaking with locals in Hong Kong to really determine what it's like to live there, and how to make a game feel like you're truly immersed in that environment. Even going as far as contacting triads to see what their activity is like, and try to make that aspect of the game as true to life as possible. To this day, I've never seen an open world that feels so alive. The density they were able to achieve and the variety in AI is just unmatched. How they were able to do this in 2012, I still don't know, but it is still so amazing to this day. Nothing makes a game that takes place in Hong Kong feel more realistic than having hundreds of people to move through when you're trying to do any given task. It sounds like it would be annoying, but it's really not, and it adds so much to the experience. There are many women that Wei meets throughout the game, through the triads, that he is eventually able to date once he gets their numbers. These are all really unique side quests with a lot of character, and all of them have really great rewards. Especially if you're going for a completionist run into the game, many of them will reveal collectibles throughout the map and make a tedious task a lot easier.
Sounds good to me.
These missions also give you a really unique opportunity to explore places of the map that you might not otherwise. For example, during the date with Amanda, you get to go through Victoria's Peak and see the skyline of Hong Kong from a really great new perspective. It's so cool how they recreated this landmark that exists in Hong Kong in real life. And you even participate in an activity that you would definitely do there, which is taking pictures, of course. If I had to give a critique to this, I wish that there were follow-up dates to build sort of a story arc with each character, but I understand that they couldn't do this given budget restraints. Each date is deeply unique from the last, and incorporates a lot of the major game mechanics, so I highly recommend doing these if you have never played them on your first playthrough. Remember GTA 4 did something like this back in the day, but it still wasn't to this level, and the rewards weren't there.
No need to get the door for me. Thanks for the ride. It was very exciting. I like exciting rides.
Sleeping Dogs 2 would have been an incredible game, but again, another garbage publisher who lacks a vision about their own industry killed it in its early stages. When this game came out, we were in the dawn of microtransactions in games. The video game industry was pivoting from an industry of art to a massive corporate machine. If a game does not provide an instant and an immense return on investment, it is a no-go. The only good games we have seen since then have been games funded by one of the last few publishers, like Sony Computer Entertainment, who actually values their devs and gives them the time and money needed to make an actually good game. It is completely understandable that the ambition of Sleeping Dogs 2 was scary to Square Enix, but it is a game that would have surely been successful in the long run. Sleeping Dogs is still talked about all the time, and over the past decade has seen incredible sales. Even though United Front Games has been defunct since 2016, I'm sure that a new developer can pick up this franchise and make it into an incredible game. If anyone from Square Enix is listening, please give up this IP to a publisher who cares about the art of video games and allow someone else to revive what you've killed off. There's no shame in it. To all of you that have watched until this point, thank you so much. I recorded this entire documentary in 4K 60, uncompressed, and I had to deal with over half a terabyte of data to make this happen. If you like this and want to see more, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. I strive to create original content which goes against the grain of YouTube, which is flooded with react channels which provide nothing to the greater community. I hope that you all enjoyed and have a great day ahead.